Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who've kept us going for over 390 episodes.
Some would say too many episodes. Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Aaron S. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, AA Ron.
AA Ron. I think Aaron's been with us for several years. And I don't know if you just recently did a name change or what, but it was saying you were a new dude. But I think actually you've been with us at least for 3 years. As always, we have a sponsor today. Of course, we're talking about Manscaped, and our current favorite, something I used just a couple hours ago, is the Beard Hedger Pro. Now, there's a lot of reasons that we love it, and we've said several times that this is like the best beard trimmer we've ever used. I think
also the easiest out of the box. It works the best out of just man.
Well, that's probably why it's the best. Like two of our favorite features. One is the easy to clean, removable sort of guard that's on.
Yeah, well, and you're also not just removing that like you do that every time. No, you don't. Like you only do that to clean it. Yeah, you don't have to do that.
You don't have to remove
time.
it to trim. I now am growing out my beard again, but before I had the sweet ass mustache, made it super easy to do that. Normally, I get all fucked up while trying to do that, and was super easy. But the other thing that we love about it is really easy to get it to match your fade, because you can just use this little dial here to go up by 0.5 millimeters on the fly, which makes it really easy to layer your sideburns into the side of your head.
Switching around, plastic tops left and right. Just, one simple, one size fits all, and then you adjust it on the fly with the dial. The thing holds a charge for a very long time.
Yeah, I think I'm just now getting down to 1 bar on it.
And it uses a USB-C charger, so it's pretty standard.
It's super convenient. And the Pro Kit comes with, and I got asked this recently, is all like, okay, but it only goes up to 10 millimeters. What do you do after that? Well, the Pro Kit comes with a brush, a comb, nice scissors, basically everything you need to do to trim it, to grow it out even longer. And then you can just primarily use this for your neck. Nobody likes neck beard.
Nobody likes neck hair. I hate neck hair.
Yeah, so you gotta clean it up somehow, and this is excellent for it. Personally, I keep the guard on, even at the 5 millimeter, because it's pretty sharp. I don't know. I haven't had any nicks or anything like that, but if you took the guard off, I don't know. I'm not guaranteeing your safety. But if you're interested in checking this out, or any of the Manscaped products like the boxers that we love, or the ball cream that we super duper love,
ball deodorant, crop preserver reviver, which you got to use, and just in case,
you never know if you're gonna get lucky. You want to smell good.
You want to smell good.
Actually, we haven't talked about it in a bit, but the crop mops, which I am now out of, go to in my gym bag. Basically the same scent as the crop preserver, but it's just a little wipe real quick. You don't have to bring the cream to the gym. You just wipe down. It's excellent, to be honest. I don't know if there's like any like sanitizer in it or anything. I don't know that, but like it also is it smells good on the hands too, so I don't mind using the wipe.
Good on the hands, smells good on your balls.
Yeah, I guess that's actually, you want it to also smell good on your hands if it's going to smell good on your balls. It makes sense. But if you're interested in checking out any of these products, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Your balls will thank you.
And speaking of Manscaped, and one of the things it can do, we didn't talk about it, was the lawnmower, which is what they got famous for. And the point of the lawnmower is to help your tree look longer, to give you that nice optical illusion of length. If you happen to be, like unfortunately unblessed in that department. Not that we have any problem with that, of course, naturally. But
No, it's just my balls are so big.
a clean tree, a clean tree makes your forest look a whole lot taller.
Because today we're talking about the perfect length.
The perfect length. What is the perfect length? And part of what goes along with perfect length also can be girth.
Yeah.
How much is in between the length of your said game?
So to give some background, what spurred this, we recently talked about just a good little survival horror game, which I'm about to play. I think tomorrow I'll be able to sit down and play it, and it's called Amnesia the Bunker,
Yes.
and it's like 5-6 hours long. You said?
I think it's 5.5 on the dot when I beat it.
Yeah, and it just gives you. It's a survival horror game, and it takes place in World War I, and you're in a camp where people start going missing, and it's just you described it as like the perfect shot of survival horror.
Yeah, because it's like you have the central location
Mhm.
and you have to try to get out because you're trapped in it, the bunker, duh. And
Isolation, yeah, perfect.
so, but it's free form. It's not like go from A to B. You have like a central area where like you can lock the doors and turn on a light. It's where your like item deposit box is.
Oh yeah, safe room.
It's where a generator is, and as you go through, you find gasoline canisters and put them in the generator, keep the generator running because it helps stave off whatever's out there. Like it says on the generator, keep it running all times. The fucker hates light. Um, doesn't hate it that much. I'll just say that. But like, so you have the centralized location, right? And it's like, okay, I need to get to. At some point, you're gonna have to get down to the prison. You're gonna have to get to the arsenal. You have to get to like maintenance, and these are blocked off. Like you have to find a key item to open these emergency shutters and then go down there, and then there's stuff down there that's also blocking your ways and whatever, all that stuff, right?
Right.
So it's classic survival horror. Here's the mansion, and you need to find the specific keys to get to the rooms, to get the other things you need to get to those key items to get out.
Right. So I guess my thought is like 5.5 hours is really short by today's standards.
Weirdly, in a weird sort of way, because like, when you think about it, not even really speed running, but just say like what you're doing, right? Like I know
Mhm.
where everything is, I know what to do. Like Metal Gear Solid 1, Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, they're 2 to 3 hours if you know where you're going.
Right. Older games definitely had this like they were shorter, girthier games.
Yeah.
Like they once you knew what you were doing and you knew where to go and what to do, like you could burn through those games.
Right.
Um, and I think the shift towards longer games came with also the shift towards more expensive games too.
Right. And it also happened, I want to say during the PlayStation 2 era where everything became about bang for your buck era, as I called it.
Yeah.
The dawn of the GTAs and whatever. So everything became like, well, I don't want to buy a full price game if I'm not getting 70 hours out of it.
And the
Yeah.
thing is, I sort of think we're entering an era like that again too, where like bang for the buck is going to matter more purely because games are there's so many on the market. So now
Mhm.
choosing one, you just got to like choose the one you're going to play for the next month, but also gaming in general, everything's getting so goddamn expensive.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was streaming all the time, I was like, man, I wish games were shorter. And I really held that opinion, not because of streaming, but at the time I was playing so many games that like
Mhm.
sometimes I was seeing too much of the same stuff. And
Yeah.
so certain areas would feel like a slog. And I'd be like, oh no, let's just like a 10-hour game is like the perfect game
Right.
for me at that
And,
time.
and and I was saying this to a developer. I was talking to a developer in my chat last night, and I'm like, a game isn't too long if it never feels like a slog.
Right.
Right? Like or it's never too short or whatever, where it's like if a game becomes there's two problems that happens when you get into like say the last third of a game. It's too easy because you've gotten too many abilities.
Hmm.
So now you're kind of just like just hopping off of heads to get to the end. Final Fantasy 16. Where by the end of the game you're so good and you're so in tune with it, like nothing's a challenge. None of the bosses are anymore. So you're kind of just
Yeah.
like going through the motions. That's one problem. The other problem is that they ramp up the difficulty so high that everything is this like this nail biting trial by fire to get through each leg of the last bit, each little bit of the last area of the game. So there's your two problems. Either you made it too hard, where like, God, everything is just like this fucking like pulling teeth to get through each area, or it's too easy. I'm too overpowered. I'm too, so like having this like perfect ramp, hard to do.
And there's also just like bad ways of balancing that, where like I think Final Fantasy 16, one thing that I noticed about the bosses was that they weren't necessarily harder than any of the enemies. They just had so much health that it took you fucking forever to get through them.
They're
To
just
give them more
sponges.
chances. Yeah, to give them more chances to hurt you really bad.
Yeah, and they offset that by just doing big cinematic things
Right.
in the middle or at the end of the boss fight, so that it's not like we have a reason for this. Like,
and to be clear, I still love Final Fantasy 16. It was very much, I liked it a lot. But I also noticed like there was that swing with Final Fantasy 16 where people were calling it too easy and were shitting on it for that. And then in the defense of, there were people swinging way off to the other side where they were like, you're ableist for saying it's easy or something. Like it was this weird, and all like, I'm not trying to say that I disliked the game at all. I loved the game, but I do think there is stuff that like, yeah, they could have made. There's better balancing. There was no reason to switch from your favorite, most leveled up abilities, basically. Like, there was no reason to try any of the later.
And I've heard about how much fun experimenting can be. Like Max was telling me, he experimented, and I tried the new ability once when I would get in. I just go back to the one I liked the most, because it was like, one, I like the ability that lets you grab them by the face and pull them down at half stagger. I'm like, that's too good. I can't give that up. And then the Titan has the parry. I'm like, that's too good. I can't give that up. And the only one I was reasonably like, I didn't use a ton, was the teleport with the Phoenix. And eventually it was just kind of like, yeah, but like certain enemies like to fly away or whatever. So I kind of like to just teleport to them. So yeah, I ended up just like two abilities were like non-negotiable.
Right.
And like the third was kind of, but like, I still would prefer, because the thing is, you can play the game like a distance fighter, like with certain abilities that let you do, charging up and shooting lasers, and apparently they're very, very, very good.
They are. Yeah, no, they're great. I played Bahamut and
Bahamut,
Gordy, the lady that lets you grab the wind.
Garuda,
yeah. Those are the two that I picked besides Ignition, like besides your normal.
Oh, for the Phoenix,
like well, Ifrit, right? Ignition is Ifrit, and then
he has both technically. I don't know.
Yeah, I did. So I did Ignition, and I did Phoenix, as the healing one that hits everybody.
Oh, okay.
Because that shit was just too convenient. Because if I got one big hit and it took half my health, I'd just hit that, get my health back, and it also kills like all the mobs on.
There's a wonderful variety of things to do in the game. The problem is that the trash mobs are trash.
Right, and you don't have to. You don't have to do any of that.
You really don't have to. They don't give you any XP.
But going back to our main topic, 16, one minor nitpick is that it is almost too long.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't get out when the getting out's good. Like, part of me blames this on the Ultima thing. No, I don't want to go too much into spoilers for anybody that hasn't played it yet, but like, there's a boss beyond the bosses. There's an evil beyond the evil kind of thing.
Right.
And sometimes when stories do that, totally fine. It works fine. It's very cool in Final Fantasy 16, but at the same time, it also feels like it starts to like drag a little bit. Like, stakes get lowered enough until they're supposed to be super high, and by the time they're super high, again, you're so fucking beast that like stakes aren't that high. And part of me is almost like, oh, Final Fantasy 16 would have been good if it was just like a Game of Thrones. You're fighting to free, those in bondage. Again,
right, and this is what I said around halfway or a little beyond halfway, where I was like, I wish it would pick which story it wants to be. Does it want to be the political, the political game of cat and mouse? Does it want to be this fucking anime with this boss beyond the boss? Or does it want to be this sort of Metal Gear Solid / Robin Hood, Outer Haven thing? I wish it would pick one and it does eventually kind of like decide I'm doing this, going this
Right.
way, but it does it very like to me. I was almost too late, and to a point where it was like it made other things in that game feel kind of like, wait, why did I even? Why
Yeah.
did we? Why did
It
we do
made
all
those
this?
things suffer, and so part of it is like, was the perfect length for Final Fantasy 16 to cut at least one of those storylines out, and just like, I don't know, make it 4 hours shorter?
Yeah,
Like, would it have been stronger? Because I
I
enjoyed
think
playing
the
the whole thing.
game. Yeah, I honestly think there's a number of things that I would have done differently,
Yeah.
but I do think that the length and pacing was a little off. Not to a point that was like terrible or
Right, it
anything like
didn't
that.
ruin anything.
Didn't ruin
Again,
anything. Just but I
God,
was like,
Twitter's ruined me. Sorry, X has ruined me. Where like I want to constantly remind like this is nitpicking. Like I'm not saying the game's trash, because every time you say any kind of opinion on Twitter, like somebody out there is like, well, you're a giant piece of shit for having this hardcore opinion. And
yeah,
it could be like, I don't know. I like the rain. Oh, floods kill people. All right. Like, but the rain's nice. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so again, not saying that Final Fantasy 16 was bad. I liked it a lot. But there's definitely stuff, and I think one of the things was length. So for a survival horror, that like 6 hour area, like it can, especially if there's replayability, fucking cool. I don't know that I would pay $70 for a 6 hour game, is where it really comes down to, where you're like,
it depends if there's replayability. I guess maybe.
right, if there's replayability, 6 hour game turns into however many hours you want to put into it.
Right.
But part of my problem with survival horror is it's been a while since survival horror has a lot of replayability for me personally, where like I'll get through the game and then like there's always another game now.
Yeah.
And so I often don't replay more than once.
Well, the weird little sort of hypocritical thing about us is that kind of like, RE4 is your favorite game, right?
Right. And I played the fuck out of it.
And it's a long game. It's the longest
Yeah.
RE. It's the longest singular RE campaign. Like 6 is longer if you combine all the campaigns, but
Right.
like so it's by far like the longest single campaign in any Resident Evil game is in 4. It's even longer than 5. But it's not survival horror necessarily. It's a third person shooter
Yeah, with some horror elements.
with horror elements.
Right.
And it's fine. I don't have a problem saying that. When you're talking about pure survival horror, a game that's really like you have limited ammo, like it's
Right.
supposed to be like you're supposed to try to like be in a get you in oh fuck situations where like you don't have an easy out. In an instance like that, I don't think having a 12-hour survival horror, pure survival horror like Resident Evil 1, I don't think that would be to me. I'm like, that doesn't seem like a really fun time. That just seems like,
Well, it can wear
wow,
you out. Yeah.
that's a lot of item management.
Well, so the way I look at it is sort of like, why was Outlast, at least the first one, so good? Because it knew that since you couldn't fight back and it was going for a pure like horror, I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily survival horror, but Outlast got you out in what, 3-4 hours? 3 hours? I can't remember
Yeah,
exactly. But
Outlast was like 4 maybe.
right. And it hits. Like those 4 hours hit. But like any of the really good horror games or survival horror games, I think are probably on the shorter side.
Right, where I think like the 6 to 7 hour mark, and then like that's just you bumbling through the dark,
Right.
not knowing what to do, where to go, yada yada. Like Resident Evil Remake probably is about that perfect length. Maybe even you could even argue RE2 original is about that perfect
RE2
length
original is
too.
kind of short.
And it's kind of short. It's
Yeah.
actually pretty short. Like I said, when you know where all the stuff is, it's like you can blaze through that. Like, and that's kind of like with Amnesia the Bunker. They actually randomize a lot of the items. There's critical items that are always in the same spot, but there's a lot of other items, ammo, fuel,
Right.
what have you. They randomize it, so you can't. They do that like on purpose so that there's no I'm just gonna bum rush the game. I don't have to do anything. Although hilariously, like, you know, when you see like speedrunners that are like, okay, well, here, watch this glitch. I'll glitch out of the I'll start the game, glitch out of the room, run to the last boss area, run out of the thing. I beat the game in 1 minute. It's like, oh, okay. Well, okay, that's a whole different can of worms. But
And is that even fun?
I mean, it's kind of fun if you're like, I have the world record. I'm like, I bullshitted my way to it.
Yeah, I got okay, fair. So for survival horror, we're gonna say sub 10 hours definitely, but that 5 to 7 hours is probably
yeah,
real fucking good.
I'm gonna say a lucky 7 hours
Okay.
is the maximum length. You want it to be 7 inch. I mean hours, no more. But you know, a 4 hour can be totally serviceable.
So when we get into this is where things get kind of weird. One of your favorite games ever is like you could put 100 hours into it long before you ever even start the main story.
Yeah.
So eh, how do you look at an RPG, or if we want to section it off, JRPG versus a Western RPG? Shout out to everybody who told me what a CRPG stands for, by the way.
Yeah, apparently it's computer.
Yeah, it was so apparently it was from when distinctions between like a console or a tabletop RPG to a computer RPG. Like back when tabletop RPG was the main type of RPG, CRPG is what they called like video game RPGs.
Right, because like Baldur's Gate and even Divinity, like they run off of D&D rule sets, apparently.
Yeah, totally. So apparently it's just like a really old name from long before there were Western RPGs, JRPGs, any of that. It was just what they called, video
Right,
games.
because the difference is like something like The Witcher or even Elder Scrolls, really.
Right.
They don't run off of D&D rules the
Yeah.
way Baldur's Gate runs off of D&D rules.
Yeah, like Baldur's Gate has randomized damage, randomized everything. It's all
Right.
chance based.
Right, because like dice rolling. So it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's like this literally functions like a tabletop game.
Yeah. But yeah, like a game like that, like Baldur's Gate, actually, is gonna be long.
Yeah, and apparently that game is very long.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like
real
100 hours. Like,
yeah, because like
normal.
a tabletop RPG, you spend a year on a campaign.
And that's what they
Some
said.
people go for like several years.
They apparently built this game as if you were playing it once a week for a year
with your friends. Yeah.
Like that's how it's built. It's built with that in mind. Like what we wanted to take a year, not a year solid, but like if you play it once a week, you'll take you about a year to get through the game.
Yeah.
They treat it like a campaign, which is like crazy, but also kind of like, I don't know, kind of impressive, kind of neat.
Well,
From an outsider perspective, I'm like, oh, that's how they're looking at the game. People playing it once a week.
Right. And like, but the people who play D&D, like I have a weekly game. I think we're almost a year into this campaign. And it's like, yeah, it hits. If you're gonna like, that's exactly who they were targeting for. And like, yep, yes, it's exactly what I wanted. I'm very happy with Baldur's Gate 3. But is there a perfect length for an RPG? Because like all the ones that you have nostalgia for, is the easiest one to pick is like Final Fantasy VII advertises a 70-hour game.
It's really not that
it's
that
not
long.
well, yeah, I mean, if you get into chocobo racing and you get into all the side stuff, yes, it's a 70-hour game.
The RPG is sort of about girth more than length.
Right. Yeah.
Especially a JRPG. I will not go any further into that analogy.
We like them thick.
But like, okay, like Chrono Trigger is a great example where it's actually one of the shorter end RPGs. Like that game takes about 20 hours, maybe 25 to beat. Because what it is like you go through a linear fashion, and then there's this point in the game where it opens up and says there's a bunch of different story threads you can investigate, or you can always just go straight to the end boss. It's a time travel game, so the mechanic is always like, do you want to just go to the point in which the big final boss appears, or do you want to go solve all these other little things throughout all these different periods and eras in history? And then it obviously makes the last boss a lot easier if you go and do certain things,
right,
optionally. But like even then, it's not that long. It takes about 20-25 hours. And I still say it's probably the most perfect RPG ever made. And it's on the shorter end. And here's the crazy thing is that I remember being in the public library, if people remember what those are. And I remember reading like really old books that were like compilation. They weren't even strategy guides, they weren't magazines, they were like books. They were trade paperback books, Secrets of NES, Secrets of the Super Nintendo. And they had one that was like near the end of the Super NES's life, and there was like, here's Chrono Trigger, and they're like, and they said, like, the one big problem with Chrono Trigger is, like, the game takes around 20, 25 hours to beat. That's just absurd for any video game. Like, the author basically was saying that no video game should ever take this long.
Wow.
Like, he was, like, incensed that, like, something would something can't be beaten in a single sitting because, hell, most video games were kind of built with the idea that, like, if you were good enough, you could beat it in a single sitting.
Well, they didn't have save files for the
Yeah,
first
a lot
2
of games.
consoles
And
or something like that?
yeah, and his arcade mentality as well. Like, at the end of the day, it's like arcade, can you beat this on a quarter? Um, no arcade game, maybe Gauntlet Legends, I guess, but, like, no arcade game really, like, takes you time to build or to beat, like, say you had free play on, nothing takes more than a half hour.
Right.
So it was kind of an interesting, like, thing to read even way back then, and, it's funny in hindsight because that became one of the shorter RPGs. And my favorite game I played this year was about 20, 25 hours to beat, 45 to 100% it. Took me like just under 45 hours to 100% everything in Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed. And I loved it. I loved the fact that it was just like this nice, breezy, simple, like it was great,
Really?
good story, good music, good battle system, good characters. Everything was just like nice, I say breezy, and it's 25 hours, but like
Well, like, a weird turn for me is that, like, since stopping streaming, I actually enjoy games being long as hell now.
hmm,
Like, Final Fantasy 16, again, like, it could have been 4 hours shorter and probably would have hit a sweet spot, but I wasn't mad that it was taking me longer to beat it. Like, I was never like, the last game where I was, like, shocked at how long it was, like, truly, like, "Holy shit, I thought this was gonna be a 12-hour, 15-hour game," and it was 30 hours, it was like Last of Us 2, because it
hmm,
was 2 campaigns basically smushed together.
yeah.
Um, and in hindsight, when I replayed that game, I was like, "Oh, no, it works." It's just the first time I was playing, I thought it was gonna be a 10-hour game, and so it shocked me and then felt very long as I got through the game. But, like, going
Hmm.
back and replaying it without that expectation, the game's much better in terms of, like, pacing because you don't when you expect a game to be much faster paced than it is, like, everything feels like a slog? Have you ever had that
Mm.
like,
Oh yeah, definitely.
uh,
Or
like,
yeah, it starts to be like, oh, why are you dragging this out so much, man?
right, but if you didn't have that expectation, like, you just didn't go into it expecting it to be shorter or faster, you don't feel that way. Like, I usually liken it to westerns. Like, older westerns have a much
Mm.
slower pace
Yeah.
building up to one single fight, basically. And so, like, growing up watching westerns, I didn't expect everything to be fast paced, but I hadn't watched a western in like a while, and I decided to go back and watch Unforgiven because I'm getting ready to watch the Japanese remake. Um, and I was like, "Fuck, this movie moves so slow." And it's like, I guess I've just watched two, and I love Unforgiven. I don't know anybody who doesn't love Unforgiven, but like, it made me want to go back and watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because that's even fucking slower and 3 times as long, it seems like. So part of me is like, I wonder if I've just been conditioned
Hmm.
for certain
Well,
genres to be
maybe I'll say this: like, here's a sacred cow. Metroidvanias to me should not exceed 10 hours.
okay.
And the thing that's going to piss everyone off is that the most beloved, Metroidvania of all time, now Hollow Knight is well exceeds that, and I actually think Hollow Knight is too big. It's too
Really?
big. That Hollow Knight is the fucking dragon dildo of Metroidvanias. Um, it is way too
Huh.
fucking big. It is a horse cock, of
Uh,
size and length and girth.
The
Uh,
thing is in that same vein, I think a good co-op
uh
game shouldn't be longer than 10 hours.
yeah, well, yeah.
Action, horror, whatever co-op game shouldn't be longer than 10 hours, and I think that was gonna be my uh controversial take. But now you're sitting here saying Metroidvanias, and I'm like, well, you beat me. Like mine, I feel like I'm like, oh, it should be more than 10 hours.
Like
Like, yeah, you won't be able to.
I've played and beat a lot of Metroidvanias, and I've never. But the Hollow Knight was the point where I was like, "This is too long." That was a
Really?
point that hit me. I'm like, "This is too much. This is
How
too
long
big."
should a platformer be?
2D or 3D? Because
2D, I
that
guess.
greatly differentiates it. A good 2D platformer is about 3 hours,
Oh,
give
okay.
or give or take.
That's what I
Like,
was just. So you think, but 3D should be longer?
oh, absolutely. Because I think the idea of a 3D
You
platformer
explore more.
3D platformer is really about and this actually can get into a bit of a shit flinging contest because some people feel that like I like 3D platformers that are focused on the actual platforming.
Hmm.
In which case, you can look at it like Super Mario 3D World, or Mario 3D Land, and then there's something like Mario 64, Mario Odyssey / Banjo Kazooie, where they're adventure games. And it's funny because I spent so much time in Banjo-Kazooie, not stuck, but just playing, replaying it growing up, and the game is actually not even that long. The game is like, I knowing what to do, I went through that game in like 8 hours or less,
Hmm.
like start to finish, not 100%, but start to finish. I went through it in like 8 hours, something or less. But that's knowing where everything is and how to do everything. And like otherwise, honestly, you can push it to like the 20-hour mark. Maybe like 15 to 20 hours for a 3D platform. It really kind of depends on what you're going for there. Like DK64, is that game too big? Yes, it is.
Should length determine price? Like, would you pay $70 for a 3-hour 2D platformer on PS5?
If it was as good as Tropical Freeze, yes.
Mm, I don't think I would.
Because again, I keep looking at Tropical Freeze. It's like, okay, what does Tropical Freeze has? Well, Tropical Freeze has like a sort of hard mode that you can unlock afterwards. It has branching paths, so there's like hidden levels to unlock in every area. Um there's like hidden like there's hard levels that you can unlock by getting stuff through the main levels. So if it's structured in a way like Super Mario World, or Tropical Freeze, yeah, I'd pay $70 for that in a fucking heartbeat. But
Because
those
you'd
are
replay it and
you replay it, you look for the secrets. Like if you have a game that's like, okay, it's 3 hours to beat it, but there's a ton of fucking secret levels, secret, challenges, like things that are just hidden all throughout the game. Um, Absolutely. If it's of a high enough quality and presentation. Because then again, then at that point, it's not 3 hours. It's like 10 plus,
yeah, I
you
was gonna
know.
say like my minimum for a full priced game for like a $70 game, I feel like 10 hours is where I'm, like if you're gonna be a 5 or 6 hour game, I would rather you be like a $40 game.
I mean, if you have nothing else to do or show for, like it's one character, one playthrough, one like, strictly
Yeah,
the same levels every time. There's nothing to unlock. Like if you have a very basic game and it's like, okay, it takes you 3 hours or less or whatever, and there's nothing to unlock, there's no secrets to find. The completionist route of it is just not there.
right.
Maybe I could start getting into the argument of like, is this really worth it? I'm like,
Well, you look at a game like Hades, wasn't Hades like 30 or $40?
I think it was like $30, I want to say, maybe 20 or 30.
And it was a hit. Like it was really big. You could play it several different times. It was very short, but like you could
But
like
it's a
replay it.
it's a
Yeah,
randomizer game, and it's all about replayability.
but it would have I don't think it would have been a hit if you had to pay $70 for it.
I think it would have been still worth it considering how much you have to do to actually see the actual story ending in that game. Like like what it actually requires you to see the final cutscene, voiced cutscene ending. Where does it end? Where does it go? That actually takes you significant chunk of time.
Oh yeah, you
Um
think so?
yeah, it does. So it's almost like it's still kind of worth it in the end.
Okay.
Um But, like, that's the game where it's built on replayability. It's not
Right.
built on, like, okay, you see the 4 zones of Hades, and that's fucking it. Um
Well, I think about like Guacamelee when I think
Mhm.
about like Guacamelee is a really replayable game. I think I've only ever replayed it one time.
Yeah. And I think it's like what, $20 or something it was when it
Yeah,
came
it's
out?
$20. So like I'm real happy with it. But like I think about like even sometimes with games designed for replayability, there's so many friggin' games now. It's really
Mhm.
hard to go back in a lot of ways. Like it's hard to
Yeah.
go spend that time. And like when I do it, I'm doing it for another, for like a reason.
Mhm.
Like I mentioned with like Last of Us, there's not a lot of reasons to replay that game. Um, but I did it just like because I basically wanted to decide if like my original opinions on it held up,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Here's an interesting one. Those fucking since you bring it up, the Sony third party, walking simulator games, whatever. Third person cinematic adventure games, whether they be linear, open world, what in between. What do you think is the perfect length of them? Because if you look at the gamut of it, from Last of Us 1 and 2, which was much longer, and then you got Spider-Man's, it goes to Tsushima, Horizons, God of War Ragnarok. What is the perfect length for these Sony Oscar bait, tearjerker films?
So for like a game like God of War, which God of War, I guess what is 5? I don't know.
Yeah.
Dad of War 2, I actually think was too long. I think Dad of War 2 was like it probably was 2 games in 1 for what they were trying because it was pretty long compared to the first
And
one too.
and you're not the first person to say that, and I actually kind of agree with you. They did say that they were like, "Hey, we're gonna finish the Norse thing off now. We're not gonna try to do a trilogy." And I was like,
Which
"You
I
know what?"
respect.
I'm like, "You know what? That's
I
fair."
do.
Because realizing how long games take nowadays and stuff, and it's like you're gonna have a multi-game storyline to tell, and it's like we're gonna pinch it off in two, which
Right,
just means
and
that second dump is a big log.
right, and I would have preferred them to just make the first game a little bit longer to get to the I don't know. The
Here's my thing for God of
hmm,
War in particular. I think they could have chopped out certain chunks of story in areas in that game and put it as a big DLC campaign, like what Xenoblade does. Where, okay, you're gonna have your main story and you're gonna go through all these new areas or whatever, and we're gonna you rewrite it, kind of reroute it to be like, and then there's gonna be a DLC campaign afterwards for those who want
hmm.
more, but we're not gonna have that lengthen the core game.
But then doesn't the complaint just become that they're doing that to make more money off of what should have been content in the original game? I don't
Well, again, you said God of War Ragnarok was probably too long. If it
right.
wasn't that long and then you had DLC campaign, like, you would be perfectly fine with it if it was shorter. And then if they do, then now they're selling it to you. Now you're paying more money to see everything that was originally interact. See, that's a weird thing to go. Do you live in Universe A, where we had a really just super fucking long God of War Ragnarok, or you live in Universe B, where you actually have to pay more money to get more of it? Now, naturally, most people would say, I'd rather have everything in the main games.
Yeah.
But
I'd rather live in Universe A. That's
right,
that's a better problem to have.
even if that does make the pacing suffer a little bit.
Right. I think games like God of War they should top out around 12 hours. Like 10 to 12 hours is
Mm.
like that's good.
That
When you
game
get
was
into
like 30 or
30,
something.
yeah, it was like 30, 35 or something like that if you were really going everywhere. And it was good and I enjoyed it. I had no
Mhm.
problem with it. But like if you're asking me like it was probably twice as long as it really needed to be. Um I just like action games like that,
Mhm.
you know, 10 to 15 hours is like pretty fucking good.
I guess
Um
it is a little bit different between, like, say, like Last of Us and God of War. That's a bit of a different question than, say, Horizon,
right.
where Horizon's like kind of an open world game, and I don't really know where I would go with how I would do Horizon, like, because you could easily say Horizon's way too bloated, and I didn't even come close to 100%. I didn't even fucking try. I was just like, I was just following the story, on my own personal whim. I had no fucking interest in in trying to like do everything in any of those games.
Yeah, I did quite a few of the side quests and stuff, but mostly I just followed the story. And I
Right.
think it was still like a 30 something hour game, wasn't it?
Right. And I don't have a problem. I actually don't have any real issue with either Horizon's length. I actually don't. They didn't really
No.
wear out their welcome either one. I just if those games played as good as 16, I would have done everything in those games.
You know, I didn't mind the combat in Horizon.
Man.
The thing about it is like it's obviously this is all subjective, but an open world game like that, where there's so much to do and explore and
Mhm.
do like that, like yeah, 100 hours, definitely an open world game should be an open
Right,
world
because
game should have enough content to fill the world.
to justify its map
Right.
size. If you're gonna have a big map in a lot of areas, you gotta that comes into girth there.
Right. And like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I don't think I even beat the main story and I put well over 100 hours into it just going to all the different,
Right.
islands and doing side quests and assassinations and stuff like that just cuz I liked being in ancient Greece.
Yeah.
Like it's just beautiful and worth exploring. Um in that sense it's like absolutely I don't care how long it is. I want it to be as long as possible in that sense. Um in a game like Last of Us, like the original Last of Us, I actually think like a cinematic, character driven, dramatic story like that,
Mhm.
15 hours is kind of the sweet spot of like
Yeah.
you get you get enough character development and stuff. Great. And that's actually why I think you should play Last of Us in hindsight, Last of Us 2, like it's two separate games. Like take a break, finish the first campaign, and then kind of like, take a little break and then come back to it and play the next one. Um, I do think it actually makes it sort of hit harder, like it's two different movies in a way,
Yeah.
or seasons of television, if you want to look at it that way. Um, but I think 15 hours is sort of the sweet spot on games like that, mostly because it can be exhausting being invested. Because that's the point of those games, right? They
Yeah.
want you to get really invested in this character and the
And,
tragedy and stuff like that.
yeah, and the thing is about it is that like the length of the game can't really save it if it's not good or
Right.
not. Like you could have a game that's short and you could be super invested, and you could have a game that's really long and you could just never get invested in those characters at all.
Mm, and in a lot of ways, like if even if the game's really, really good, if you're getting too long without getting to the fucking point,
Yeah.
it's almost like it I don't you're waiting to rip the band-aid off so long that
Mhm.
you're getting angrier and angrier about the band-aid. Like
Right.
if the resolution or it's the power-up effect in filler anime.
Yeah.
Like, where it's just like, you just come on, let's go. Let's get to the point. Let's get to the point. Come on. You're spending whole episodes where they're doing basically nothing. And like, okay, some cool stuff might happen in those episodes, but like you just want to get to the goddamn point already. Um, I think a lot of that, like even good stuff can be thrown out as if it's filler by
Yeah.
not like taking advantage of getting to the point. Like when you have people in when you have the nuts, yeah, you want to slow things down and drag it out a little bit because it keeps people like it builds anticipation.
Yeah.
If you spend 5 hours building anticipation, uh everyone just gets tired out and doesn't care anymore by the time they get to the thing you wanted them to care about,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And
And I
I've seen
think
that
that,
happen.
well, it sort of happens in The Last of Us too. Again, I liked that game, but there are moments that are really, really good, but because they're sort of stuffed in the middle of sections that feel like they're just holding you off from getting to the climax, or getting to the point, like a slog, you sort of overlook those moments. Like there's a whole section in The Last of Us 2 where you're going through a hospital that's creepy as shit, but everything until you get to the Rat King feels like it's just fucking with you, slowing you down before you do the cool thing.
Yeah.
Like all of the lead up of going across the city and going across the bridge and going through the building, like with Lev and all that shit. Like all that shit is almost forgettable, even though they're really good parts. And the only reason I'm remembering them is because I replayed the game a second time. But like in my head, you don't, compared to the Rat King, you don't remember any of that shit nearly as well. You know, like I can see it on your face. You do not remember what I'm talking about necessarily. You
In
remember the
one or
Rat King
two?
in 2. You remember the Rat King. Everybody fucking remembers the Rat King, the weird blob monster that's like made up of several different monsters.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking Ninja Turtles Rat King.
No, no. The Rat King is that blob monster that's like in the
Okay.
hospital and it's freaky. That's all memorable. All the first half of that lead up sequence is sort of like there's good moments, but like it's mostly just like, all right, we're just slowing way the hell down.
Well,
To
there's a lot of things like that where like the game likes to chew the scenery a lot.
yeah,
And like they get to these weird parts where it's like sort of explore, not an open zone, but like a large
right,
area.
yeah,
And you kind of have a little bit of freedom of how you tackle objects in what order, a little bit. But like, yeah, I don't know. It's to me, you know, it really kind of depends on the genre because we are going by genre here, where it's like
right.
I think 15 actually kind of pushes it for a third
Really?
person cinematic game. Kind of
Well, how
pushes
long
it.
do you think it should be?
I mean, if we're talking a game like Last of Us, which is like basically a third person kind of like Uncharted and Last of Us follow the same principle of progress, get into like gameplay segment, which is usually a shootout or a stealth segment, and then finish that, watch cutscene, new gameplay segment. We're like moving, get into an area,
Hmm.
gameplay segments, cutscene or whatever. And around 10 hours is kind of um right around where I think like 15 is a little bit pushing it unless you have enough variety to do it. Because like Last of Us at least does the thing like one anyways, where you're going across the country.
Hmm.
So you're kind of going from area to area to area to area. And you meet like new characters in each state that you're in, right? So there's like, oh, you have the thing with Bill, and you have the thing with the dad and the kid, and
Yeah.
his brother, and then like the cannibal guy or whatever. Like they kind of like, okay, so there's different things you're seeing and doing or whatever. So you can kind of like maybe you could stretch it out a little bit longer than that. But I think like I don't think you want to go past 15 personally. And I think when you start getting into like it's 20 hours of a linear cutscene driven third person shooter, that's where I'm kind of starting to like, oh boy, that gameplay better be real rock solid. Like
Well,
it has to be real good to punch and shoot things.
and the thing is like I really liked the combat in Last of Us 2. And so I liked playing the game. Like being 30 hours, I didn't have a problem with it. It's just that I realized you can't sit down and do that in one sitting. One, because it is a stressful game. Like you're dealing
Yeah.
with some pretty hardcore topics. But two, I think because of streaming, we look at things in like bite-sized chunks.
Mm.
You know, like you're going to stream for 8 hours if you're doing like a long stream sometimes.
Yeah.
um and sometimes it can feel like if you have to do multiple streams of one game, it can feel like a slog just because streaming it's a job. Streaming is a job in a lot of ways, and like some games that, if you're playing it over the course of a month for a few hours a night when you get home from work, having it be 30 hours is kind of fucking sick. It's like a TV show you can come back to.
Mm.
If you're playing 8 hours at a time, doing more than 2 sessions is fucking atrocious. It can be.
Well,
It can be like one of a game that I really, really liked, Senua's Sacrifice, Hellblade. I
right.
really liked it. I streamed it. And it's not a long game. I don't
Yeah.
even think it's over 10 hours. I don't think it's that long of a game. But because it's kind of deals with some serious
Pretty
hardcore,
heavy stuff,
yeah,
yeah.
like it deals with some heavy stuff. I think I did 2 or 3 sessions, and even though it wasn't a long game, like that 3rd session, I was just like, "Fuck, I need to beat this." And I liked that game a lot. But like I was like, "Fuck." Whereas again, Odyssey, I streamed that game. I streamed it for 100 hours and didn't give a shit. Like cuz I was just coming back to it and streaming it.
Yeah, I think one of the genres I think is kind of like interesting to nail down is first person shooters.
Mm.
Because I think a campaign for a first-person shooter, not a first-person RPG, a first-person shooter, probably shouldn't exceed 10 hours. It probably should be shorter than that, honestly.
Full-blown
Like,
action,
yeah.
and shooters like COD, I do not think should go over 10 hours for any fucking reason ever.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
But now, granted, with COD, especially if there's co-op, again, I put it in that 10-hour. Like, I want to be able to sit
Mhm.
down and play with a friend and not have to well, especially now, right? You're old enough where you might not get to play it again for a week, 2
Mhm.
weeks. So you want to be able to get through. You want to be able to
Yeah,
get through the
now
game.
obviously these things have multiplayer components, and you play those
Mhm.
games you end up playing those games for hundreds, if not thousands of
Yeah.
hours.
Oh
That's
yeah.
multiplayer. That's different.
Right.
I mean, like a campaign, which still millions of people do play COD just for the campaign. A lot of people don't realize that, but it still happens.
Yeah. Oh, I actually, that brings up a really good point. How long should a multiplayer game last? Now we're not talking about hours, but how long should a multiplayer game be relevant? Like right now, a COD seems to be relevant to most people for about 6 months, and then its lifespan seems to be like a year.
I don't think, because here's the thing, the industry is obsessed with this idea of a 10-year cycle, right?
Hmm.
I don't think any multiplayer game should really be thought about how can we extend this for 10 years. You should be thinking about how can we provide a year's worth of constant content. And then at that point, we'll literally just be like, we're done. If you want to keep playing the game, great.
But there will be no new updates.
But we're not gonna update. We're not gonna update the game again. We're gonna
We're now
move
going
on to
on.
the
Yeah.
next
Right.
project. We're not. But and that's multiplayer. Not. I'm not talking about Destiny because again, Destiny is an RPG.
Hmm.
So I want to make that a very clear distinction here.
Yeah. Purely multiplayer, fighting games,
I
shooting
am
games,
talking
stuff like
about,
that. Yeah.
stuff that
Hmm.
is like pure multiplayer.
Right.
There's no, you can have a ranking system, but not a leveling system.
Hmm.
Right. There's a difference there. Ranking being just like, hey, you've played this much, you're this rank. Leveling being like your stats change as you
Right.
level up, not stats. So the really sad thing is that I look at something like Warzone, which had the Rebirth Island, or it had Alcatraz, whatever. It was the same map,
Hmm.
but it was a 40-person, 10-team mini BR. Where 10 teams of 4 land on not a giant, but like an Alcatraz size map, and they kill each other until one's left standing. And you had all these little things in there. The thing is they took that away for God knows what fucking reason. And they didn't even have to update it because it still exists in Blackout 4, or Black Ops 4. It's called Blackout, whatever. Black
Yeah.
Ops 4 still has it. Still, it's not updated in any way, shape, or form. They
Yeah,
abandoned
they
it
just took
years
it away
ago.
to try and keep you on the hook for the next time it comes back.
Right. So they took away so that they could do this whole thing with Warzone 2, but he doesn't have the same modes or anything. It
Mhm.
doesn't have that sort of same hook. And the thing is like all they needed to do was a plan about a year's worth of content. Hey, we tried some different things. We did like a Halloween mode. We did like this mode. We added you could literally just, here's a rotation of weapon sets you could find, and just have the game on auto every week or month. It'll just change the ground loot or whatever, right? Like you could have just set it to automatic like that and just kind of like kept it going as long as there was a player base. But they just straight up just take it away.
Mhm.
Because yes, gamers are fickle, and yes, we all have goldfish attention spans now.
That's the
But
real problem, yeah.
at the same time, uh, they have this idea, this mentality that we have to keep pushing something new, otherwise people aren't going to play it. And it's kind of like what it ends up doing, and at least in COD's case, it ended up just pushing everyone away. Everyone just moved on to other games. I've moved on. I'm playing Naraka now. Which is a melee sword combat based VR. Like,
Say what now? I
oh,
haven't heard of this.
what? No, my God, we did a sponsorship. Max is in the game, like literally in the game.
What?
Like Max and
Oh,
Benny
I
are in the game.
did see this. I didn't realize there was a BR.
It's a BR. Yes, it's a BR. It's a melee based BR, like
That's
swords
super
and
cool.
staves and whatever. It's actually I'm having a great time with it. A little imbalanced, but whatever. This is how things work, like
Balance is overrated. That's all I'm
Well,
gonna say.
again, but you know what? You know you know what makes it okay though? It's all about luck of the draw. No one's getting a loadout where everyone's
Right.
running around with the toppest tier stuff. No, they still have to find it. Like they still have to try to find it. So
Hell yeah.
at least it has that, which I think is to me, I don't know why COD abandoned that idea. But anyways, when you take something that people liked away, so just so you can get them to place it, and I don't even know why. Like it's one of those weird things where I think a lot of companies miss the boat a bit, where they're like, oh, we've left something going too long, it's gonna rot. We need to constantly bring out a completely new thing, whole new mode entirely.
Well,
Like,
that's the Fortnite effect, I suppose.
which is weird because like
And it's working for Fortnite.
Fortnite stayed how many years refused to go no build mode, and then they finally went no build mode. But you know what they did? You know what Fortnite didn't do? You know what
Hmm.
it didn't do? It didn't get rid of build mode.
No.
It did for like a week or whatever, and then they brought it back. But no build is still there. No build became permanent,
And it's superior.
and it's superior. Yes, it is
It is
superior.
superior.
You know what Fortnite also still has? Save the World. It still has its PvE mode.
Wow.
It still exists,
Yeah, well, there's also just no reason to get rid of that stuff.
right? Just
Yeah.
no reason to get rid of this stuff. Like, but to
Uh,
answer your question initially, I think multiplayer games should be planned with about a year's worth of content, and then you keep it going as long as there's a player base. Like I don't
it
think
seems simple,
companies
just nobody does it.
I don't think companies, because the thing is, like, well, Genshin Impact, which is $100 million to launch, they said, the CEO said, I don't, and God knows how much of this is true. It's probably not, but he was saying it was going to cost $200 million a year to update, to keep the game continuously up, and it does. It is a very, very consistent, continuously updated game and a high budget
Yeah.
game. I don't know if it's actually costing $200 million a year, but apparently the main office is in Singapore, and it's one of the highest paid tech companies in Singapore. Like people like who are like try to get in there to work there because they pay so well. But imagine that, like you pay your people really well, and then all of a sudden, or whatever,
Everybody wants to work there. I don't know.
everyone wants to work there. It's
So
incredible,
strange. Yeah.
so strange, but it makes billions,
Yep.
right? Um, and it's like I played that game at launch and I thought it was really good, and I just never had an interest in going back after a while. But I don't think every company should be trying to do 10 years of
No.
content in a multiplayer game. I think a game can be a year, and this is my okay, and this
And that's the
is
COD model, right? COD
yeah, and
plans for a year.
this is my conspiracy theory that I've been saying, because the whole report that came out about Last of Us Factions, the
Mhm.
multiplayer for 2, my theory, my crazy conspiracy, this is tales from my ass. The sources, I made it the fuck up. I think Naughty Dog made a multiplayer game that was like the first one. It was expanded. It was probably pretty damn good, and they probably had about a year's worth of content for
Hmm.
the game.
They were like, no, we want live services.
Sony said straight up, I want it to be live service. Bungie came in, according to the report, came in and said it wasn't going, it wasn't a 10, you didn't have 10-year game here. Bungie came in and said this will not sustain itself for 10 years. Sorry, it just doesn't. Bungie would know because they have Destiny under their belt.
Mm-hmm.
Sony has then now backburned the fuck out of this game and is trying to determine what to do with it. And they probably want to try to morph it into a fucking Destiny thing. And the thing I think that's sad about it is that, like, I don't think Last of Us multiplayer fans in particular would have minded if it was just a expanded version of Last of Us 1's multiplayer, had about a year's worth of content plan, after its release. And then Naughty Dog could have just been like, yeah, and now we're moving on to, Last of Us 3 or some other game. But Sony, big crying Jim Ryan, he wanted 10 years out of this thing.
Right.
So
my big brain out of fucking nowhere thought was that they tried to turn it into an extraction shooter because extraction shooters got popular sort of in the interim. Like
which
Last of Us 2
that
factions.
probably, honestly, you're probably more accurate than me. Honestly, I
I
think you're probably more right. But here's the thing. Why would Sony need to do that if they are literally making Marathon?
I know. Well, I Marathon might be a response to Bungie coming in and being like, "This isn't going to be your thing," and then them being like, "Then you need to make one," and Bungie's like, "Okay," because
Right?
Marathon's several years out.
Right. Yeah, it is. And the funny thing too is that, like, imagine if it was just like, well, yeah, well, we're gonna have multiple extraction shooters. It's like, why? Why do you need multiple extraction shooters under
Because Jim
one?
Ryan hates everything good and fun.
He well, and he hates competition. Like he's very much the epitome of, like, I want all the money, not some of the money. I want all the attention, not some of the attention.
Right.
I want to drown my competition. If this was a baby pageant, I would be drowning the other kids' babies. Like, literally, because I don't want them to even be in consideration for winning.
I think that wasn't that was a Netflix show. Pretty sure.
I don't know.
Just drowning babies. I
I'm
don't
just saying that, like, he's the kind of guy who would literally lock all the other kids in the basement at a beauty pageant so that only his kid wins.
know. That's a pretty great closing thought.
That's that. Come on, I mean, we literally have watched it happen in the court case there. But yeah, like, yeah, that's the other thing too. The multiplayer is kind of a whole nother can of worms there. But yeah, I think about a year's worth of support for a multiplayer game is about all it really fucking needs, because I can't. There's not a lot of games in my life where I was playing over a year's worth. Maybe two for COD 4.
COD 4 we played for like
Two,
almost
3
2.
years, almost 2 years,
But
pretty much
no
until Modern
COD
Warfare
after
2.
that. No
No
COD after
COD.
that did we play more
Every
than a
COD
year.
after that. Granted, they've released a COD a year, so we always kind of like moved on to the next one.
Right.
But I was never jonesing to go back, right?
Right.
Like when Call of Duty Ghost came out and it fucking sucked. I didn't go back to like Modern Warfare 3 or anything else. I just like, I'm just not going to play COD for now. I just
Yeah, we
didn't
just
play
moved
COD.
on to something else.
I just didn't play COD. So a year is about all I fucking need, unless you hit that magical unicorn of COD 4, where it's like I'll play for 2.
Or fuck Ubisoft's game, Rainbow Six Siege.
Right.
But I only played that for like 6 months to a year and then got burned out and moved on. But it's still going strong.
It is.
But I
It
don't know if
is.
that's new people or if it's the same people still playing it. You know, because it scratches that CS:GO itch, and like people have been playing
Yeah.
CS:GO for 20 years, never moved on,
Yeah,
and maybe now they're like,
look,
hit
there
me.
are those magical experiences, but you need to stop thinking your game's going to be it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's nothing new for CS:GO for 20
Decades. I don't
yeah.
know.
So to reiterate before we end the episode, uh a platformer, 2D platformer, 3 hours, in that range. A really good survival horror, uh in the 5 to 10.
Yeah.
We'll be generous because some can be up to 10, but like that 5 to 7 hour is like, hell
That's
yeah,
sweet spot, yeah.
you'll get something good. Action games should be in the 10 hour or less, you know, around there. I'm saying 15 hours for those prestige games, those character driven prestige
Yeah, I
games.
think if you have the variety of experiences and places, you can do it. Like RE4,
Right.
or something. Then you can do it. But like I say, otherwise, I'm like, you better have the best. You better have some real fucking tight pacing.
Open world games, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck how long they are. 30, 40 hours. As long as it's a world I want to be in, long.
Yeah, that's sort of like a asterisk.
Right.
It's like,
Well, there's asterisks for all this. Like, there's someone out there who like they're sitting there like, I wish Resident Evil 4 was 30 hours long, and I don't blame them. I really enjoyed playing the game. Probably would have played it for 30 hours, but I don't think it would have been good at 30. I don't know. Yeah, it really. I definitely think since stopping streaming, my desire for longer games has gone up. And so I wonder if that changes for you if it's a game you're streaming versus a game you're not streaming, because you stream pretty much everything you play now. But like
yeah,
a game where you're just like, I'm just going to sit down and enjoy this. If you're really enjoying it, do you want a longer game? Like, is that's something about that is something that people can comment on. I haven't done a tell us on YouTube or Twitter thing. Is it, if it's a game that you're really, really loving, you don't give a shit how long it is? Or is there like a cutoff? Is there like a hard, like, I don't play games that are over 25 hours? is that something for you? I mean, I bet you for parents, any of the parents that are listening are probably like, 10 hours or less is like the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
I can't do that. It'll take me 2 weeks to get through that anyway. If you're in college, you're probably like, fuck it, give me an MMO. I'll play it for hundreds of hours. I don't give a shit.
If you're in college, you're like, fuck my free time.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I was. So I get it. But as always, we have some patrons to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Aaron S. Thank you, Aaron. And our producers for this episode are Mutton Chops Johnson, the Pink Hammer, the Schmidt One, Screwnami, Croy35, Hyper Viper 89, Ziggy Z, and Online Persona. Thank you, dudes. We will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.